dass ich zu langsam bin für all die Dinge, die um mich herum geschehen. Doch all die Menschen, die mich wirklich, wirklich gern haben, sie sind genauso außer Atem wie ich. Und manchmal glaube ich, dass nichts mehr wichtig ist. Ich treibe ziellos bis zum Tag, an dem wir sterben werden. Doch gerade dann, wenn ich dann wirklich nicht mehr weiter weiß, liegt mein gepflegter Pessimismus in Scherben und alles, was mir dann noch übrig bleibt. Ein bisschen Zweisamkeit als Zeitvertreib, das bisschen Herzschmerz tut doch gar nicht so weh. Den ganzen Unsinn werde ich nie verstehen. Da hilft nur Einatmen und vorwärts gehen. Es ist ganz einfach, es ist ganz einfach. Das Leben lebt, es ist ein wunderschöner Sommertag. Manchmal glaube ich, dass ich zu müde bin. Aus meinem Sessel komme ich nie mehr wieder hoch. Aber wenn es klingelt, bin ich rasend schnell am Telefon. Es kann ja sein, dass mich irgendjemand braucht. Und manchmal glaube ich, dass ich zu leise bin. Dann schrei ich lauter als meine Lieder in den Wind. Doch viel, viel lauter noch sind die, die nichts zu sagen haben. Und wenn das stimmt, dann halte ich lieber mein Maul und alles, was mir da noch übrig bleibt. Ein bisschen Zweisamkeit als Zeitvertreib, das bisschen Herzschmerz tut doch gar nicht so weh. Den ganzen Unsinn werde ich nie verstehen. Da hilft nur Einatmen und vorwärts gehen. Es ist ganz einfach, es ist ganz einfach. Das Leben lebt, es ist ein wunderschöner Sommertag. Ein Sommertag, ein Sommertag, ein Sommertag.
Thank you, Gisbert from Knyphausen. Hi, Gisbert. Thank you for coming and joining us. How's it to be back in Nijmegen?
It's good to be back.
Gisbert studied in Nijmegen quite a while ago.
It's a very long time ago, but nothing has changed.
Is that good or bad?
And so you have also some connection to the Lux, right?
Well, yeah, I've been here to see movies and to eat and to drink beer and to see concerts.
And now to play music.
And now to play music myself, yes.
Okay, thank you so much. Gisbert will join us later on again and will sing for us again. Yes. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our event tonight. Sturm und Drang is the name of the series we are organizing at the Duitsland Institute, Amsterdam. My name is Mario Daniels. I'm the host tonight, and I'm an historian at the DIA. So this is part of an ongoing series. It's relatively young still, this program, but we call it Sturm und Drang, which is roughly translated into something like storm and stress. That's the literary epoch, but we would probably say storm and impulse, which is basically a format that tries to address urgent societal questions and things which should be at the forefront of our attention. And the other thing we try to do this, because everybody tries to do this, exactly, is to invite especially younger academics, activists, public intellectuals to think about the urgent questions of our societies today. And tonight we are going to talk about the climate crisis, and you are in for a treat, I think, because we have invited two great young activists, one from Germany, one from the Netherlands, and that's also part of what we are doing, trying to cross the national border. On my left, I welcome Linda Kastrup. Welcome, Linda. She is very active in Fridays for Future in Germany. On every kind of political level, on the local level, she is active in Fridays for Future in her hometown, Duisburg. She's also active on the state level in Nordrhein-Westfalen. And she's also active on the federal level as one of the people of Fridays for Future in Germany. And to my right, I welcome Benito Walker, who comes from the Netherlands. He's the founder of Youth for Climate in the Netherlands, and he's also the chairman of the Burgerberaad. And I think we will also talk a little bit about what that means. So welcome. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for taking the time, and thank you for coming to Nijmegen for this event. So this is going to be a conversation. I'm just the moderator. I'm the public face of this event, but I want to point out that this program was actually put together in cooperation with two dear colleagues, Wiebke Pietlik, and first of all, actually, she did really hard work for putting this together, Petra Schulze-Göcking. Thank you very much for this very fruitful and just plain fun cooperation. And I would also like to thank the Lux for hosting this event, and I want to thank also everyone from the DIA for their support. So that's the ceremonial part. Let's dive into the conversation. So I would like to start off just by asking you, so what keeps you busy these days? So what does activism look like for you right now, besides being here?
For me, activism looks quite differently, because on the one hand, I am organizing a lot of protests on the street, and then on the other hand, I'm also like a lot of doing behind the scenes work and like doing also press work like these sort of events. But yeah, the main part is like organizing protests on the streets, demonstrations, and I'm focusing there on the Stärkrader Wald, Stärkrader Forest. We call it the Stärki at the moment, which is a forest near my hometown that has a motorway junction in it, and that one is supposed to get bigger, and the forest is going to get destroyed for that. And yeah, we're focusing there at the moment, and organizing a lot of protests around that.
So can you tell us a little bit more? What does protest look like at this forest?
At the moment, we're doing a lot of different events. We've done like a climate justice camp. 2 years ago, we've done huge demonstrations county-wise, and a lot of smaller demonstrations as well, but like a lot of press work and a lot of different things that come together. And at the moment, we're doing a lot of like walks in the forest, like so that you can see a little bit more of the forest, but there are also a lot of exciting things coming up that I can't talk about right now. Mm-hmm. But so I think we're going to see a lot about that more in the future, and maybe some people here can join there as well.
Okay, good. Thank you. And Benito, how about you? How does life look like for you right now?
Well, I think it's funny because we had a conversation about that just before we started. We are very different activists. I'm much more of a constructive speaker. I don't really take to the streets very often. I try to talk to policymakers, to people of our age, because that's interesting. A lot of people, and I'm interested to hear about how you experience this, but a lot of people of my age, they don't concern themselves with climate change. In my bubble, of course, they do, but this week I was in Rotterdam at the Hogeschool in Holland, and I talked to students social work, and they had no idea about climate change. They're not concerned with this topic whatsoever. So I'm also trying to, speak with them. Why not? What motivates you otherwise? What are you doing on a day-to-day basis? And how does this not, get to you? Why does it not get to you? So that's more my activism, actually, these days.
Mm-hmm. And besides going to schools, what is on your schedule, for example, next week? Is there also something really important, something completely different?
Not really on this topic, I guess. I mean, with Burgerberaad, I don't know how that would translate into English, but it's an organization that focuses on citizens' assemblies. So to make sure that, basically everyone here can participate and have a say in the policy that we are creating. And we are primarily focusing on climate as a subject. So what we try to do is local, regional, but also right now we are trying to get it nationally, to get a citizens' assembly to make sure that we are actually, speeding up a bit about taking climate action. So that's basically what I do. Yeah. But it's probably more passive than what you are doing.
But I think that's already quite interesting to see, right, that I just called you activists, both of you, right? And you pointed out, but what is activism? What does that entail? And what does the spectrum look like? And I think one striking observation is easily being done, and that's that the climate movement is not the climate movement. It's not a homogeneous group. And I would argue you can use a lot of different terms, and they are thrown around quite a bit. And they go from relatively passive to very, very active. And I would say probably passive, relatively passive, and not very militant is raising awareness. And then you have something like protest. And the next step would be probably something like a strike. And then you would have, at the very, very end, something like a rebellion, right? So that's pretty much the spectrum. Where would you place your work, and why did you choose this kind of part of the spectrum? Linda, Benito,
well, it's a very interesting question. I think I started at where you started, so taking to the streets, actively voicing my concerns. But I think I realized that that's not really my strength, because I feel some people, feel empowered when they take to the streets and they, protest with their peers. But I just feel like I'm just one of a lot of people who's just standing there because they kind of lost hope that, the government is going to take action, they're going to do it on time. They have a lot of fear that, climate change is going to affect them on a very short term. And I have that fear as well, but for me, taking to the streets is not taking that fear away. So what I'm trying to do is taking that fear away by talking to policymakers, parliament members, but also a lot of young people to try to get it, get it going, to get it more, broadly seen. So that's what I'm doing. So I think I started at the protesting part, and now I'm much more passive activist.
Yeah, passive is not the right word,
no,
obviously,
not
right? But that's interesting. And have you ever considered going down the other way of the spectrum and to opt for more militancy?
What would you?
So
what is militant for you?
So it's not my word, obviously, but so to see what we just see with activities of civil disobedience. That's another word that's not as harsh, right? To see that, for example, Extinction Rebellion or The Last Generation in Germany is quite offensive in some regards to some observers. Have you ever thought about going down that road?
No, to be honest, I haven't. No, and I think Extinction Rebellion, the name already says it, a rebellion. And I think it's very. We also just had a conversation about. I think it's very inspiring that there are people, willing to take to the streets to get, to get taken into custody. I think that's very inspiring. But like I said, that's not where my strength is. I cannot. For myself, talk to the policeman about changing, climate policy. So that's not where my strength is. But I very much admire the people who are doing that. Yeah, but I haven't considered it. No.
And where would you place your activity, and why did you choose that?
I think for me it's like a wider range of different activities. So I also do go to schools and do awareness, raise awareness for the topic. But then I do talk with politicians, although I lost my hope in politicians, and I don't think that there is a lot of things that are coming from these talks. And then one of the main things is that I am organizing protests on the streets, and I'm not one of the people who stick themselves on the street, but I do think that that is something, or at least that's something that I am good in, and that's something that motivates the people. And You said that does not give you, or that the people have lost their hope, but for me, like, these demonstrations do give me hope. Like, to see that many people come together and join the fight, join the protest, and say, okay, you're not alone, we're fighting together, you've maybe organized this, but there are like thousands of people coming to the demonstration and saying, hey, we're standing right next to you. That's something that gives me incredible amount of hope. And yeah, so that's like more of my spectrum, I think, like a little bit of everything, but like towards the fight on the streets.
Yeah, and I think that's also really helpful to understand, as I mentioned, that it's not a movement that is homogeneous in any case. What I find interesting about the two statements is that it's also very much about the relationship of protesters towards the government, right? And you said basically you're pessimistic about talking to politicians. Why is that so? And how do you perceive the government? Is that a potential partner that is just disappointing you, or is it an adversary, or how would you describe the relationship towards the state or the government?
I think it's a very, very difficult relationship, because on the one hand, we're depending on the decisions that they are making. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, they're doing everything to not achieve climate justice, to not hold up their promise for the Paris Agreement. And we're basically doing their job. We're reminding them of the Paris Agreement, that they committed to 1.5 degrees or below 2 degrees. And for that, in Germany at the moment, we see that we tend to get a lot more repressions. We do need to fear a lot more police brutality. A lot of people are getting taken into jail, and we've had, for example, a huge protest at the beginning of January. I don't know if you've heard about it, but there was a village, Lützerath, which protected tons of coal that were lying underneath it. And hundreds of activists lived in that village, and thousands were coming for the protest around there. But the greenest government that we've ever had in Germany, we have the Green Party at the moment in the coalition in Germany, and the greenest government that we've ever had decided to come with thousands of policemen and women and evict that village violently. And it was incredible how many people got hurt there, had to be taken to the hospital. And these decisions were made by politicians. Mm-hmm. And we've tried to talk millions of hours with them. We've spent so much of our power, of our capacity to organize protests, into talking to them and convincing them otherwise, and trying to make them listen to the science. But they wouldn't, because they were just holding up for the company that wanted to get that coal, to get the profit of it. And to see that the government decides to go against activists with such a violence is just how would you believe that they can make a change, that they want to make a change, if they criminalize the people that actually demand that? And that is something that one of the reasons why I lost hope in them.
But you said, yeah, I get your point, and losing hope is a strong statement, but you started the statement with, we rely on the state for many things, right? So how do you work with this tension? So on the one hand, you're obviously very disappointed, but on the other hand, you see, okay, to enable the society to reach change, we need to talk to the government. Mm-hmm. So how do you manage this kind of tension?
Yeah, I mean, I don't believe that the change is coming from the government themselves. I believe that the change is coming if enough people come together on the streets and put pressure on them. And not just on the streets, but also talk to them in loads of different ways. I don't think that there's one way of doing activism. As we see, there are millions of different ways, and they're all doing their thing. But if we come together as people and we put pressure on them, the change is coming by us. And I don't think that the government is actually doing the change. So I think we need them as some sort of instrument so that they can change the laws, that they can change the regulations. But I don't have hope that they would change it just for themselves if there wouldn't be any pressure from the streets, from the people, from us.
Mm-hmm. Benito, how would you describe your relationship to the Dutch government? Is it also kind of a relationship of disappointment, or how would you describe that?
Well, I think in the Netherlands we're seeing on a very wide range of subjects that the government isn't there for a lot of people, and I think it's on this subject as well like that. And like you said, in Germany is the greenest government you've ever had. I think we have that in the Netherlands as well. We have a climate fund of 35 billion euros at this moment, but we also have political parties who just say, like, we should take that to the shredder and don't do anything with it. So I think that is what makes it very complicated. Just 4 years ago, the largest political party was a party that said that the climate crisis isn't even real. So I think that's what makes it difficult for the government to take action. I think in the Netherlands, the government isn't really, they haven't succeeded in telling the people what the effect of climate change is going to be, what it's going to do for them. And I think communication and information is very important. If I look back on my time in high school, which isn't that long ago, by the way, but I had no subject whatsoever on the topic of climate change, nothing. So I don't think it's that weird, but, well, I cannot say that I have a lot of hope that the government is going to, well, do what it takes anytime soon.
So would you agree with Linda that it's about putting pressure on the state institutions to make them move? Is that
yes.
what
how
you would describe your mission, so to speak?
I think it's like that, but also to take to the politicians that there are a lot of people, the future leaders of our country, of Europe, of the world, who are concerned about whether there will even be a world, in 30 years. And, well, 2 years ago we had the enormous floodings in Limburg, but also in Germany and in Belgium and a lot of other countries, and where your Prime Minister said that it was, the effect of climate change. We had a Prime Minister who said, well, it's too soon, to say that it has anything to do with the climate crisis. So I think that's a big difference, and I think we've come, a long way since then, but we're still not there yet. So yeah, we need to apply pressure to make sure that they see how important it is to take climate action now.
But even if let's be optimistic for a second and say, it works. So putting pressure on the government works, and at some point the decision-making processes will be constructive from your perspective. It will take a lot of time, right? I mean, parliamentary democracy is not a snappy system. So how do you think about that? So on the one hand, there is obviously time pressure, and all the climate scientists point out, time is running out. But on the other hand, democracies take time.
Yeah,
so how do you address this problem here?
Well, I think it's also a big ask, to reflect, actually, for both of us, for the climate movement, because a lot of people feel like they are being pressured into something they don't think is relevant. And I think, I can only speak for Dutch people, but I think when you pressure Dutch people, they tend to go the other ways. I don't know, how that is in Germany, but that's how it is here. And I think sometimes we need to take that, into consideration as well when we take to the streets or when we force people to do something they don't know that they have to do. So I think, it's also good to reflect from time to time. Also, from within the climate movement. But on the other hand, we don't have a lot of time. So yeah, it's a difficult balance that we have to take.
How would you deal with the time?
I think the
problem?
frustrating thing is that the science is so clear, and for example, the IPCC, they have ideas how you can manage, how you can change things quickly, and if we even just think about the things that could be going, and for example in Germany, at the moment we have a minister in the area of traffic that's just doing everything but not thinking about climate change. And if we would be having ministers that would actually take that into account and think about it and make it one of the priorities with every single decision, that would be such a big step forward. But at the moment we're still fighting for the bare minimum, that they actually see, okay, that is a problem And we don't want more cars, we want like a change in traffic, we want a transformation, and all these sort of things, that they don't evict a whole village, that they don't come with police brutality. I mean, there are so many things that they're just blocking. And if all these things would be like started to get changed, like that would already be a big win, and we could go so much further with that already.
Yeah.
If I can add to that, I think, becoming more sustainable right now is very much of a luxury product. I think today was on the news, or yesterday was on the news, that gas prices will be, be risen. They will become more expensive, and electrical cars, they're not available to everybody. And I think that is also a problem when we talk about climate action. If not everybody can participate, well, they will become stubborn, they will become obstructive, and I think we need to do something about that as well. If we're gonna make gasoline more expensive, we should at least, get public transport cheaper. But we're not doing things like that, so that also makes it complicated for people to participate.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the issues in the big discussion, that, like, for example, fossil fuel companies always try to make it like, oh, you have to change. We're not the issue. You have to change. You have to reduce your own carbon footprint. And that's one of the biggest lies and greenwashing campaigns that we've ever heard. Like, none of us is going to change the planet when we go vegan. Like, all these little things are little steps, but the problem is not going to fix itself when we go individually vegan. But like the politics, like they have to make the regulations that like living sustainable is not more expensive, is not more time consuming. For example, if you want to travel by train, that takes so much more time than if you would just hop on a plane and like in a few hours you'll be on the other side of the world. And like these regulations, that should be like the politics that change that and that make like the sustainable option always the cheap one, the quick one, the easy one that you don't even have to think about it twice. And then everybody would get sustainable, because at the moment it's more time consuming, it's more expensive. You have to put a lot of time in there just to think about, hey, what is the more sustainable option? And that's such a big systematic problem that has to get addressed. And that can't get addressed if we like say to the people like, oh, you did eat meat, you're a bad person. Like, that's not going to solve the problem, and that's going to make a lot of people frustrated, because they think, oh, I can't do anything against the climate crisis because I'm not perfect myself. But like, I'm not perfect myself either, and I can be an activist, and none of us can be perfect in a world that's not like sustainable. Like, how do we want to live perfectly sustainable in a world that's not made for it?
But at the same time, the way you describe it, it shows also the dilemmas, right? Because the longer we talk, the more complex it gets, right? So right now, and we are only 10 minutes in, right? And so we are now not just talking about activism and the relationship between activists and the state, but also about the larger questions of what is social justice? How do we organize policies that are fair, that don't leave people behind? And if I may be skeptical for a second, it sounds like, yeah, it gets actually untractable at some point, because the way you need to change things is caught up in complexities. So how do you deal with complexities? So how is it always about boiling it down to something that is manageable, or is it something different? So how do we live with complexity as an activist? Because there's always a but, right?
Yeah.
So how do you live with all those buts? But there is this, and there is that.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think, yeah, but even when there isn't one, you will make one. Someone will make one. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. If we have to look at it that way, it goes for all policy areas.
Yeah.
So that's very difficult, and that's also why I'm saying we should at least make it available for people to participate, and that can be and actually be becoming more sustainable, but also in the policy making process, get people to participate. Also people who are denying that climate change is even happening, because it's important that they can also, voice their concerns, because, their concerns are just as valid as ours.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes within the climate movement, we think we know better what is happening. And, you know, in some way you could say that we do, because we are saying, you know, this is the science is clear, it has been clear for, well, a very long time. But that, you know, that some people on the other side, they think that as well, and we should just try to keep them more involved. And maybe then we can skip some of the buts and come a little closer together. And you're probably going to ask me, like, how are we going to do that? And I have to admit, I don't have the exact answer to that.
Uh-huh.
No, I think that's a very difficult political question.
Yeah.
And if you put it into like a global perspective, all these decisions that are made here at the moment that are like going against 1.5 degrees, they always have a very big but in the global south. Like the climate crisis is much worse in the global south, and we are like causing that. So there's always a but, like even with those decisions that are like created right now that don't seem to have a big but in Germany, but like you always have to count that in as well.
Yeah. One but from my end, it's interesting, right? Because on the one hand, we talk about concepts of participation and also representation. And on the other hand, we talk about ideas of changing regulations that force certain actors to do something, right? And I see there is a tension there again, right? Because on the one hand, it's really about talking and finding ways of consensus building, and the other way is, no, sometimes people have to be pushed. So one of the questions is also here, kind of what is actually successful protest and climate activism. So how would you measure success for you, for yourself, for your activities? Is there a moment when you think, oh yeah, this is actually 100% successful?
For me, one of the biggest successful moments in my sort of, however you want to call career in activism, or however, like in the time that I've done activism, was at the beginning of January when the eviction of Lützerath was, and there was this huge demonstration that I mainly organized with like a few other people, but we were like a group of 10 people who like did the main organization of the demonstration. And then at the end of the day, there were 35,000 people. And for me, that was incredibly successful because, I mean, we couldn't protect Lützerath. The governments decided to destroy it, and they did destroy it, but we had 35,000 people there, and we weren't alone, and that was not the success that you would have expected at the beginning of the whole protest, but it was like another sort of way that you could say, okay, we did hold the government accountable. We made it into the press worldwide, like everybody, like all the news were like talking about it. And that's like a different way of success, but it's still, it's still at the end, it's still success. But also, I think there are a lot of the times where you can say that we did not succeed. Like, as we see that the governments are not doing the things that we would want them to do quick enough, like the science wants them to do quick enough. So it's like, I don't think that we just succeed, but like, that was, for example, for me personally, that was a big moment of success.
Mm-hmm. And for you? What is success?
I think I haven't succeeded.
Mm-hmm.
No, I don't think I have. And I think when people take to the streets, they have lots of different reasons. Sometimes people just take to the streets to just get together with other people who have the same fears, or want to just voice their concerns. And sometimes you just want to get media attention to pressure government. And I think we have succeeded, and probably also in Germany in that, and we see a lot of political parties who were not so eager to take climate action, who are now really trying to take climate action. So maybe that's a little success, but we're still far away from where we want to go. But I think that's also a very big responsibility to take onto our shoulders. I'm just 21. I mean, you're also very young. We're both students. Like, it's not our job to solve it. It's not our job to voice all those concerns. So I think we're doing what we can, and maybe in that we are successful.
Yeah, I think so. Like in the stuff that we are doing, I think probably super successful, but it wouldn't be our job in first hand to do this. these things. That's the job of the government. And I mean, basically, if you think about like in these small steps, everything that we do, I mean, that wouldn't be our job, and everything that we do beyond that, that's like, wow, okay, great, we came together, we did something. I mean, every single action is like something good and something that you can kind of be proud of. And if you, of course, if you look at it like in the whole area of climate crisis, and like if you look towards the Paris Agreement, then we have still a very long way. If that's like the final product that we want to reach, then we are still far away from success.
Mm-hmm. So what I find so striking is you're very much on the same page, but as we found out earlier when we had dinner, there is not much communication between you two and crossing the national border. So that's kind of strange, right? I mean, in many ways it's really strange. And usually I think a lot of people would argue, yeah, the climate movement is a global movement, and they are very, very well entangled, and they network all the time. And here we have the case where we see it's maybe not entirely true. So one of the questions I was wondering about is, what are obstacles for cooperation? So we always assume if you're on the same page, cooperation is like this, but obviously it's not. So how do you have, in your experience, moments where you see that crossing a national border is actually difficult?
Yes, very much. We, with Youth for Climate in 2020, we tried to organize a strike in Belgium, in Brussels, because what we wanted to do is to get young people of my age, I was, I think, 18 at the time, to take the role of the governments of our countries. So we were there with the climate movements of the Netherlands, Belgium, Italy, Luxembourg, and Germany, of course. And, well, we tried to, take their role. But what is interesting about getting together is that we have all very different types of organizational structures. Mm-hmm. Some organizations have boards and board members, and some are just, widely, basically just a network. And that makes it very difficult to, organize something. And we're also students, we have exams, we have, all kinds of lectures we need to attend. So it's very difficult to actually get together and find a common moment that we can all join and that we can all agree on. Sometimes that's very difficult. But I think what we also have seen is that we all want to. It's just, to actually do it, that's difficult.
I think the way to get it started is kind of difficult because we also all have different ways of communication, and then different ways, as you mentioned, that we organize ourselves in, and you can't just some people say, okay, yeah, that's our leader and he can decide everything, and then other people say, okay, no, we have to talk with everybody and get a compromise and all these sort of things. So it's I think the beginning is always a little bit harder, but we do see that when we come together, and for example, Fridays for Future is doing that as well, I think once a year that we're meeting together, all together with a lot of different countries, at least in Europe, and I think in some other parts in the world they're doing that as well, that we can see the strength, and that we can see the strength from coming together and, building up the climate justice movement globally is something very strong.
Does it also play a role that the climate discourses are also kind of nationally framed? I mean, you're from Germany, Atomausstieg just happened. And in the Netherlands, the nuclear energy is not really the biggest debate. And I mean, historically in Germany, that is really important. Does that play a role?
Well, it's interesting, but in Germany, they closed, right?
Yeah.
But in the Netherlands, we are having the debate actually opening some more.
Yeah, right, exactly.
So that's, it's just across the border. That's very interesting.
And does that make cooperation more difficult? Because, I mean, I just imagine you explaining your Dutch colleagues why there's an end to nuclear energy in Germany, and you think,
I think it plays a role there because, the politics in every country are so different, and everybody has to deal with their own specific problems, and depending on which parties are in the coalition, there the ruling parties, it's always a little bit different. And as you mentioned, nuclear power is in each country very difficult or like different topic. And I think like those specific questions, it's sometimes like a little bit harder like to find like maybe the right way to go for all these nations. And I think there's probably not the one way to go for all these nations, but like the big goal to achieve climate justice, that's like what we all can agree on. And then like every single group in each country can figure out their way how they want to put the pressure on their country to achieve that for like their nation.
Mm-hmm.
I think we made it very complex. I mean, we have in the Netherlands a very specific, democratic system. In Germany is a different system, and I won't even start about the way it's formed in Belgium. So, I mean, it's very difficult, to get that moving in the same direction. And there are a lot of different types of actors involved, and I think that's basically what makes it difficult, because what we're all trying to do is get our governments to take action, but the way to do that in the Netherlands is probably very different from the way to do that in Germany, so that makes it different and difficult.
Are there kind of national environmental movement traditions you build on? Is there something like a background story you tell when you get together? I mean, the German environmental movement has a long history, and you started with the Green Party and how disappointed you are. Does that play any role? Does that play any role for you that there is this kind of 50-year history coming before you?
I think especially with the Greens, it's just, I mean, I do not expect anything from them. Like, we've seen that they do decisions that are everything but not green. But I think it's crazy to see that there is a party that has been there for so many years and advocating for climate justice for so many years, and then like coming into the government and doing the things that they're doing right now. And like, just like to see that in the perspective that they've been there for so long, that they should be knowing what they're doing, that they should be knowing what they're talking about, and then like still doing like the opposite. It's like.
And is there a positive story in there as well, or is it just we don't want to become like the Green Party?
For me, myself, I don't want to become like the Green Party.
Okay.
Okay, I think I can say that very specific, but like in the other tradition, I know very, very, a lot of other climate justice activists that are way older than I, and I can't even imagine how it must be to be in that movement for so many decades and fighting for the same things, and now just achieving, for example, the exit of nuclear energy in Germany. Like, they've been fighting for 40 years for that or something like that, and like now achieving these things, and I think it's like so incredible that a lot of them have been active so long, and that's something that they can, and that we as a climate movement, I think, can be very proud of.
Yeah, at the same time, since we talked about time pressure, right, it took 50 years, so... But
well, I think it's very concerning that apparently in Germany people have been fighting for 50 years to get them closed, and just when they reach it, we open 2 of those in the Netherlands. I think that's concerning. Like, that we are not directly communicating. I think that is, not very unlogical, but that our governments are clearly not communicating about this. I think that is concerning. Yeah.
So when you are in the Burgerberaad bureau, do you have, so maybe you can tell us a little bit what Burgerberaad really means, and where does that come from? Does it also have a historical tradition you are aware of, and you put yourself into a longer line of Dutch politics?
Yeah, it's actually at the core of the political party that I support, the D66.
Mm-hmm.
The core of that party is actually to become more, to attach more value to the democracy that we have. So to actually give people a say in what is happening, what is going to be the policy. And what a citizens' assembly does is it gives people who are normally probably not participating, maybe not even voting, it gives them a say in what is happening on this subject. So there's a lot of very important factors that you have to consider, and I won't get into all of those, but it's important that you give people the same value within the conversation. So if there's a politician at the table and, just someone like us or someone who's not participating at all normally, they have an equal say in what is going to happen. And I think outside of a citizens' assembly, we hardly ever see that. The one person is always more valuable somehow than the other, and I think that's a problem. So yeah, if you're asking, if there's a political background, I think that would be it.
Yeah, I find, so in Germany, we also had experiments with that. And maybe it's just me not being a good newspaper reader, but I had the feeling it fizzled. It did not really have a larger impact. Do you think it's a very Dutch thing to come up with this idea of having citizen assemblies?
No, I wouldn't say it's Dutch. We've seen it in France, we've seen it in Denmark and Ireland, and that it works very effectively, very productively, not only for the policy outcome, but also for people, feeling appreciated, feeling valued. So I wouldn't say it is very Dutch. I think it works worldwide, but sometimes it doesn't work, because sometimes, people are participating, and sometimes, over 9 months, and then, but politicians have the final say in what is happening. Sometimes they just decide, well, we're not going to do anything with it, thanks for your participation, but that is it. Well, I understand that, then it doesn't work. So you have to give people the feeling that what they're saying has value. And of course, not everything we're saying is going to happen one-on-one. But if you're not doing anything with it, then of course it's not going to happen. So I wouldn't say it's particularly Dutch. No.
But it's basically that you all talk together and then the politicians can still decide whether they want to take it into further notice, or do they have to, do they get held accountable for anything, the things that you talk about?
Well, if you speak about a good citizens' assembly, you would get a very clear mandate up front. So whatever institution is giving the mandate, it should also be the institution that is allowed to say that it goes through or not. And if it does not go through, it's very important that they explain why.
So what would a mandate look like?
Well, it could say that, on a specific topic, whatever comes out, if there are a number of factors, taken into consideration, that they will just do what that says.
Do you have a concrete example? Just one?
Not in the Netherlands, because we haven't really had a national one. Okay. We have had a lot of local ones. I think in Ireland we had an example, but I'm not able to explain it to you right here, right now. It's also on a very different topic. It's on the topic of abortion, but I think it's important generally to say that people should be valued, feel valued, and that is the importance of a citizens' assembly. To make sure that you say up front what people can expect and that you live up to that expectation, and that is what the mandate is for.
Mm-hmm. So one last question, then we should open it up for the Q&A. So a lot of the things we discussed so far are, I think, very, very interesting and raise a lot of really complicated questions. And one of the things that sticks out to me is at least that you're very aware, despite your activism, that you have a lot of limits, right? So you see pretty much the limits of the reach of what you can do. How do you deal with that? Because it could also be demoralizing, that you see all the time that there are limits, that you are running into problems in the political system, in the international cooperation, in the way you get your message out. Is that of any concern, or do you just say, yeah, I do what I do, and that's fine?
On the one hand, I do see the limits, but then on the other hand, again, I do see what we're able to achieve when we come together. And I see the limits that the politics, that the media, that all bring with us, with them. But on the other hand, I see the power of the people. And if we come together in each sort of activism that we do, if we come together on the streets, if we advocate for the climate crisis, for climate justice, like all the people that I work with are so inspiring, and we've done things bigger than I could have ever imagined. That we, as just like simple humans, it's not that we have any specific skills. Like we're just like random people who decided that we can come together, that we can organize something. And that is something, for me, in my opinion, that states very strongly that we can break those limits and that we can make them possible. And that's what gives me hope, and that's what keeps me up fighting for climate justice, because I really do imagine that if we come together, if we fight together, that we can break all these limits that the politics are giving us and achieve everything that we want to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I completely agree. But I also think in the Netherlands we see it changes the way people take to the streets. It changes. People become less patient. And I understand that. I completely understand that. But so, no, I don't think we agree that there's only so much we can do. I think it makes people hopeless, and people don't want to be hopeless. So I think it makes that people are changing the way they are protesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's also concerning.
Good, thank you. So let's open up the floor. Are there questions in the audience? Please go ahead, don't be shy. Just go for it.
Okay, so you talked about, near the start, about talking to your own governments and how difficult that is and the differences between European political systems. But have you ever thought about taking it like one step higher to the European level? Because in the end, every single European Union country needs to adhere to these European laws. And as a European Union citizen, you have the legal right to change or add legislation. You'd need like 1 million signatures for it. So it's difficult, but I think for a topic like this, it's doable. So have you ever thought about doing something like that?
Do you want to go first?
Well, yes, I've thought about it, definitely, and thanks for the question. It's a great question. I think we tried 2 years ago to go to the European Commission, but it's very difficult to mobilize people to get there. So it would be great if we could, organize a very big protest there, and then I would definitely join. But it's difficult because, it is in France or in Belgium, so you would actually say that it would be something of the organization in that country to do, but that's also a big ask. So yeah, I've definitely thought about it, but I would like to, discover with you how we can organize it, and then, yeah, let's do it.
And I think that's also something like, I know that we've been doing like actions in front of, like in Strasbourg, for example, but it's not that easy, like you said, to get all these people there to organize something, but I think that's something that could have like a lot of potential in it, and I think there have been some huge protests there as well. So yeah, I think that would be a nice step to look forward to in the next time.
And it's interesting, if I can add, I'm studying public administration right now, and I just had a subject about the European Union. And what is interesting about, or actually very concerning, is that a lot of people aren't in any way, busy with the European institutions. Some people don't even know what the European institutions are. So, yeah, it's a great question, and I think if we can get more attention for this, then we'll be fine. Would be great, actually.
Yeah, thank you for your answers. To just like say one little thing, you talked about like getting everyone to Brussels, but there is the possibility to make like a motion to the European Commission, which is also a legal right as a European citizen, where you can just get signatures from people to move the Commission to think or talk about a certain topic, and if you get enough signatures, then they are legally obligated to do something like that. It's difficult, but like there are so many activist groups, so if you have the possibility and to work together, like you said, you want to work together and you're trying, then maybe.
Well, let's get it done. Let's get it done.
Well, yeah, that was my question. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question.
More questions? Here in the front.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you very much. So if I understand you correctly, so you both think it's most important to pressure governments to adhere to the Paris Agreement, and that actually there is a broad consensus in society that things should be done, or that there's an acceptance that and a broad knowledge that climate change is something real, but that many people still are hesitant to actually jump on board of, let's say, climate policies that really pressure governments to change, on a broad political basis, the way of how we live economically, industrially, and so on. So, what do you think? How could a broad majority of society be brought on board to adhere? Why is there such a let's say, such a hesitancy in society to accept that the climate movement is something which, everybody, despite which political other ideas you agree upon or not agree upon, is something that we should all take seriously, and also because it's apparently not really just a question of finance, that we should all work with. So what are your suggestions here?
I think in the media, the climate crisis always gets promoted as something that takes something away from you, like makes your life a little worse. And it does, but like in the media, it's like, oh my gosh, you can't, buy the third trousers in the month or something like that. And that's something that a lot of people that are uncomfortable with change, and change is something that is coming up with the climate crisis, and that we have to face either way. And now we can kind of control how we wanted the change, but at like one point it's too late, and we're just going to have the change because we're going to have like all these catastrophes right here. So that's something that the media. At least in Germany, I can say that the media, especially like more right-winged media, is like promoting very well that climate crisis is change and change is very bad and all these sort of things, and that it needs like a lot of motivation for people to actually face that. And on the other hand, like about like getting enough majorities, like getting big enough majority to actually demand that. I'm always kind of questioning the thing myself, because I think we're at the point where we don't have the time to get all these people together. Like we have to, but it's like kind of difficult because we're running out of time to get like the main part of the society convinced that like climate crisis is something that is bad for everybody. So that's something that I'm struggling in my head a little bit with as well, because like we need the people, but on the other hand, we don't have the time to get all of these people on our side.
Yeah, I think in the Netherlands, we see a lot of people who have very different, more pressing concerns right now. And I think that's a problem. As long as our political system, our government is not addressing those issues, why would they care about what's going to happen to them in 10 years if they're having concerns about tomorrow? And I get that, and I think sometimes we need to reflect on that a bit more as climate movement.
And we need to think those things together, because like those social problems that we're seeing in so many countries at the moment, and the climate crisis, they go together like they're so deeply connected. Like, for example, the high prices that we need to pay for the energy at the moment and the climate crisis, like it's like so deeply intertwined into each other, and that's something that we need to face more, that needs to get addressed more. And I think that's one of the big issues as well, because it gets like promoted as like, oh, we only can have like cheap energy prices if we don't solve the climate crisis, or we solve the climate crisis and then we all have to pay even more for our energy. But like, that's something that we that sort of needs to get more into the society and to like, the minds of everybody, that the problems can get solved together and not like separately.
Yeah, and I think our political system in the Netherlands is actually showing exactly the opposite. Because today was in the news that, I think I already said that, the gasoline prices are going to be risen. And at the same time, public transport is also going to cost more. It makes no sense to people. And why would people take public transport if they can just, I had a keynote on Hogeschool in Holland, I already said that as well. And I asked those students, well, when you go, on holiday to Spain or whatever, on those typical vacations, do you even consider going by train? No, they don't, because it takes more time, all those things you already said. And as long as we don't change that, as long as we don't show people how they benefit from it, why would they care? If they don't have any concerns, why would they care? And I think that is what we should do something about. And I'm not saying that, they shouldn't care, but I think it's not weird that they are not caring right now, because they have other concerns.
There are 2 more hands up there, and 1 more over there. Yeah.
Thank you. If what you said, I was thinking, like, because in Holland people don't believe in governments. It's like on both sides, so on the left and the right wing. But also the climate crisis is there because our government is sort of actually more into companies and capitalism. I think we could sort of, on both political sides, agree on that we should do something about the involvement of big companies into our politics, and that could be a solution to get people together from both sides. Like, maybe that could be a suggestion to make one movement instead of we are the farmers and we are against this, or so against climate change. What do you think about this?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting, and I think that it speaks to the wider problem that we see in the Netherlands, that a lot of people don't feel represented, a lot of people feel like they're being left out when it comes to the policy making process. And I think eventually that would also reflect on the way people perceive climate action or the climate crisis. So I think it's very interesting.
What we see in Germany at the moment is that a lot of these, like you said, like the farmers, for example, that we try to involve them in the climate movement, that there are fights that are coming together. For example, tomorrow we have like big strikes again from the people that are working in the train companies. And these fights all belong together, because how are we going to get a change in like the traffic transformation, or like in the area of traffic, if there are no people that want to work there? So like to make them see that and to say, okay, hey, we need a functioning train system and you need more money, like let's combine these fights. And that's something that we've been doing in Germany. And for example, around the protests in Lützerath, we also had the farmers there that were protesting for their land there that got destroyed. Like that was one of the best grounds that you could like grow things in that got destroyed there, that got digged away. So yeah, you just need to find like the thing that combines these fights, and then you can be like, we can be so strong as a big, huge movement.
Yeah.
Hi, I have a question. Moreover, you showed a photo of Just Stop Oil action, and my question is, where is the line between activism and vandalism? While we are doing really nice activism, we are also stepping kind of on line of vandalism we recently had in the Netherlands, of Van Gogh's paintings. While it gives eye for an eye, we are trying to save something by destroying something.
Did anything actually got destroyed? Because as far as I'm aware, there was always like a glass protection, and they just threw like, or at least in Germany, they threw like super stuff like that at like paintings, but like nothing ever got destroyed. Did something here got destroyed?
No, nothing got destroyed, but at the end it gets out of control because it's the works of art. It's a legacy of countries.
So is your question Is violence allowed within the climate movement? Is that what you want us to reflect on? Or?
No, where do you see the line between activism and vandalism? Like, do you
That's a
personally?
very interesting question.
I think nothing got destroyed in that part, and as far as no humans are actually like put in danger, I think activism can be very creative. And as we see the media, like everybody read about it. Everybody read about those paintings that had soup on them. But do they, the media is not like taking up those protests on the street in the same way that they used to. So it needs some new sorts of protests to get like that attention. And as long as the media is working in that way, I think okay, go for it.
I think the line for me is violence. As long as no one is hurt, no one is injured, I think a lot should be allowed. But I also think it's the responsibility of the government to make sure it doesn't come to that. So you can say, where's the line? And it's a great question. I cannot say there's a very direct line, but I think it's up to the government to make sure that, protests won't get out of hand.
They could be doing things to stop all these protests, but they won't, so, yeah.
But violence is no violence for me. No.
One last question.
Okay, that puts some pressure on my shoulders now. Thank you for that, Mario. My question is, if you would consider talking to the industries and the big companies, because you are talking about change and you're addressing the government or the public for putting pressure on, of course, the politicians, or perhaps make changes themselves. But there is this saying like, follow the money. How about addressing the industries, getting there as a partner in crime, to put more pressure on the politics as a one way? Would that be an option? Or what about forgetting about the government, because the government and the structures are not always the ones who are that fast in changing, not that flexible, and sometimes changes come from a complete different place in where we live. So perhaps you have a better option to address different groups. So would that be a possibility to say, let's talk to Shell and make a change there, and then we do get what we want because they're such a huge player? These both ways, would that something which you could or dare to consider or try out?
I can talk a little bit about my experience around Burgerberaad again. Those companies don't want to change as long as they can make profit from it. We do live in a capitalistic society, and as long as they can make profit, and those leaders in those companies, they only think in numbers and figures and how they can get even higher, I think it's very hard to convince them, okay, you need to stop your business, you need to rethink your business, you need to make less money and be less successful in their sort of definition. So that's something that has always been very frustrating, but I also have a company in my hometown that says, hey, we want to change, but we can't change because the political system's not there, because the regulations aren't there that we can change, the basic needs that we would have, for example, change to renewable energy, it's not possible because we don't have enough renewable energy in my county. So it's like the politics always have to have their part in it, because they're the ones who make the regulations, who are there responsible for building for renewable energy, and then the companies can rely on that. And I think that the companies won't change on their own as long as they can make more profit from it. So I do see your point, but I think it's, at least in my opinion, I don't think that can be that successful.
I think this might be the first thing that we disagree on this evening. No, I think my opinion on this is very unpopular within the climate movement, but I think we see that, they're the bad guys, Shell, Tata Steel, they're the bad guys, but the bad guys need our help just as well as the good guys. And I think it's very important to start the conversation about them. How can we help them making it also profitable for them. Because that's, you know, that's where we want to go. We don't want to name and shame them because they probably don't care. They will make profit anyway. So we need to make sure that it's also profitable for them to become more sustainable. And I think one way is to talk with them. We have done that. Youth for Climate has done that years ago. But I also think it's up to the government. So I wouldn't say leave them alone, but it's also up to the government, you know, to create a system in which it is not, you know, how do you say that? It's not durable anymore to be not sustainable. So I think it's a two-way street. We should stop naming and shaming. And, you know, that doesn't mean that we can quit all the protests, you know, at Shell. And no, they need to become more sustainable, but they also need help. And I remember that Tata Steel, a year ago, 2 years ago, they also said, you know, it's kind of greenwashing, maybe, but they also said we need help because we want to become more sustainable. But look at the job that we have. How can we become sustainable? So they need help. So it's a two-way street. So yes, they need to take more responsibility, but I think we can also do more to get them to be less of a bad guy and more of a good guy. But like I said, that's a very unpopular opinion.
So thank you very much for the lively discussion. Thank you very much, Linda, and thank you very much, Benito. We're out of time, believe it or not. Thank you for the very interesting discussion. Thank you for your attention. I think we deserve some music at the very end. So, Gisbert, it's your turn. And it would be nice if you said also a word which songs you are going to sing. But a round of applause is right.
Well, I don't have songs that really cover the topic that you guys talked about. So I decided first I will play, since this is a Dutch-German exchange evening also, I'm playing a song of a Dutch band that I admire a lot, and it's called Spinvis. And the song is from his first album, and it goes like this. Je droomt wel vaker van een feest, maar hier ben je nog nooit geweest. Iedereen kijkt naar voetbal en een venster aan je kop. Oh, wat wil die man in hemelsnaam? Hoe kom je hier? Hoe kom je hier vandaan? En als je wegkomt, waarheen wou je dan wel gaan? Hey, praat maar door en jij dwaalt af, dus je weet niet wie de wedstrijd wint als je luistert naar de wolken. Als je luistert naar de wind. Je agenda en je zonnebril, wat doen die hier nou? Maar je ligt weer in je eigen bed, in je eigen lot. En opeens staat alles stil. Een motor draait, de baby huilt. Een vogel schreeuwt, de dag begint en de snelweg zuist. Een motor draait, de baby huilt. Een vogel schreeuwt, de dag begint en de snelweg zuist. En er is altijd wat en altijd spijt van al het geld en al die tijd op de onverharde wegen die je naar hier hebben geleid. Oh, de ochtenden zijn wit en kou en hoe je ook je stuur vasthoudt, de wind komt door je handschoenen heen. Je vingers zijn versteend. En zo is er altijd iets wat je verlamt. En is het niet te weten, is het wel de drank of zo. Het spookt maar in je hoofd. Het was lang geleden een eeuwigheid. Je fietste op de afsluitdijk en ik weet niet wat je er nu van vindt. Als je luistert naar de wolken. Als je luistert naar de wind. Naar de wolken. Als je luistert naar de wind. De motor draait, de baby huilt, een vogel schreeuwt. De dag begint en de snelweg zuist, de motor draait, de baby huilt, een vogel schreeuwt. De dag begint en de snelweg zuist. Thank you. So this is kind of exciting after listening for 1 hour to this very interesting conversation, to just start singing out of the blue. But I want to say thank you for the invitation. I was living here in this town. Maybe that's why I got invited. And I'm glad to be back. But it's a long time ago. And I just need to tune the guitar real quick. Do you have another question that you wanted to ask me?
You're pro enough to fill the time, I guess.
Yes, I can. Okay. The next song is about a person living in a big city and feeling kind of detached from himself and from others and from nature. So maybe I have a song which has something to do with the topic. But it's a very dark one, so after that I will play a more positive one. Sie ist der schönste Stern von allen. Und du tust alles, um ihr zu gefallen. Du willst das Mondlicht für sie sein, obwohl du weißt, am hellsten scheint sie ganz für sich allein. Du sitzt im warmen Bauch der Stadt. Trinkst dich dumm, du siehst dich satt. Willst ne verlorene Seele sein, obwohl du ahnst, damit bist du nicht allein. Du hast keine Zeit zu verlieren. Es geht immer weiter, zur Not auf allen Vieren. Du bist so ein kluges Tier, die Krone der Schöpfung, der ganze Stolz des Urknalls. Und die Welt, ja die Welt, sie gehört dir. Tja. Alle paar Wochen suchst du Ruhe, starkst ungelenkt durch die Natur, fragst dich, was du noch für sie bist, bis du merkst, dass sie dich nicht vermisst. Oh ja, du bist ein Teil von ihr, doch ihr ist ganz egal, ob du nun existierst, es gibt nichts zu kapieren. Deine heile Welt, sie geht verloren mit dir. Jetzt sitzt du neben mir, hier im Dämmerlicht der Bar. Dein Blick wird trübe und dein Herz sieht langsam wieder klar. Du hast so ein Gefühl, das du noch nicht so ganz durchschaust. Wir sind alle hier, obwohl uns niemand braucht. Die Sehnsucht bleibt bei dir, so wie das Quietschen bleibt an einer Eingangstür. Du hast keine Zeit zu verlieren. Deine Wunderwelt der Technik, sie geht verloren mit dir. So, thank you. I don't know, the ones who could understand the lyrics, they might have realized I have a dark mind sometimes. So I admire a lot of people who believe in change and who take to the streets or into politics or whatever, and to talk, to really believe in changing something, because sometimes I'm also one of these persons feeling very helpless and depressed after reading the news and doesn't know what to do. So it's amazing that we have people like you trying to change the world. That's really cool. We all should try to do that. All right. Have a nice evening. I'm gonna tune this real quick so it will sound better. Is this live somewhere on TV or internet or something? Hello world. Don't worry. It's gonna be fine. Ich wurde geboren an einem Fluss und seitdem treibe ich dahin durch dieses Leben, das mich lieben will. Egal was ich auch bin, und also existiere ich. Ich atme und finde, das war gar kein schlechter Anfang. Dann lag ich eine Weile lang im Koma, jetzt bin ich endlich wieder wach und ich habe euch Blumen und Pralinen vom Arsch der Hölle mitgebracht. Ich lerne langsam wieder laufen und sprechen, ich gebe den Dingen einen Namen. Ich nenne sie meine Liebe, meine Lügen, meine Hoffnung, meine Schuld, meine Leidenschaft, mein Feuer, meine Wut und meine Ungeduld, mein Nein und mein Vielleicht und mein unbedingtes Ja. Oh ja, ich will. Oh ja, ich will. Oh ja, ich will. Ich will mich wieder wundern, will erstaunt sein, will wie der allererste Mensch mit neuen Augen zwischen den Dingen stehen und nichts wieder erkennen, die Schritte setzen durch Wälder und Wiesen und sagen, ja, es ist gut, es ist gar nicht so schlecht. Und also öffne ich meine Arme, ich öffne sie so weit ich kann, denn jeder Tag ist ein Geschenk, er ist nur scheiße verpackt und man fummelt am Geschenkpapier rum und kriegt es nur mühsam davon ab. hey, ich weiß jetzt, es gibt Menschen, die diese Welt durchaus rechtfertigen, die durch ihr bloßes Dasein anderen Menschen Leben helfen. Die lieben und lieben und lieben und lieben und lieben und lieben. Als wär's das Leichteste der Welt. Ich will einer von ihnen sein. Ich will einer von ihnen sein. Oh ja, ich will. Oh ja, ich will. Und manchmal liege ich nachts wach und träume von den schönsten Melodien. Sie schweben durch die Dunkelheit und ich stell mir vor, ich schwebe mit ihnen. Und irgendetwas in mir will leuchten und wird schwerelos. Dann kommt ein Schlagzeug rein und treibt den Beat bis hinter meine Ohren. Ein Bass umgarnt die Bassdrum, meine Gitarre drängt nach vorn. Und irgendwo im Nirgendwo pfeift ein himmlisches Feedback. Oh, und alles gerät in Bewegung, der ganze Raum fängt an zu schwingen. Und ich höre eine engelsgleiche Stimme und viele mehr, die mitsingen. Sie singen, never mind the darkness, baby, you will be saved by Rock'n'Roll, yeah, Rock'n'Roll. Oh yeah, you will. Oh yeah, you will. Oh ja, ich will, ja, ich will, ja, ich will, ja, ich will. Hey, and one fine morning she turned on the New York station. She couldn't believe what she heard at all. She started dancing to that fine, fine music. Her life was saved by rock and roll.
Ja, vielen Dank, Gisbert. Thank you for coming. It was a pleasure to be your host tonight. If you liked the evening, please follow the DIA on social media. You can watch this entire program again on YouTube if you think that's a good idea. I think it should be a good idea. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and please come back for the next event at some point. I don't know when, but there will be one. Thank you very much. Goodbye. Benito, danke. Thank you.